Now, just a little warning here at the start that there will be some major spoilers for the latest episode of The Bad Batch in this video, which is the 4th episode. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away. Okay, so let me begin by saying that I didn't think this was a bad episode. I didn't dislike it or anything like that. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But it was probably my least favorite so far, though considering there's only been 4 episodes, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's not like there's been 20 or 30 episodes or something. And yeah, this one could certainly be dubbed a bit more on the filler side, which is okay. Not every single episode needs to move the story forward in big or intriguing ways or have profound character moments. Sometimes an episode can be good and enjoyed completely in and of itself, just for what it is. Though sure, it's great when a series can make every episode have an impact to keep the story always moving forward and have every episode leave you wanting more. But that usually only happens when a series is very streamlined, very focused, and usually has a smaller number of episodes. And so part of the trade-off of getting a 16-episode season, which is what we're getting with The Bad Batch here, is that things will be dragged and stretched out a bit sometimes. Which isn't to say nothing of note happened in this episode, because 2 pretty important things do indeed get established. The first being that Fennec Shand, who we saw in The Mandalorian, which takes place some 30 years after the show, is now after the Bad Batch, or more specifically has been hired by someone to find and capture Omega, and I'll talk more about all that in a bit. While the other thing this episode established, or maybe I should say hammered home, is that the Bad Batch is very much on their own. They will have to fend completely for themselves now. There's no Republic there funding them or basically giving them anything and everything they may need or feeding them. We even see Hunter trying to pawn off the last of their special minds for some credits, but he ends up selling Echo instead, who the shop owner thought was a droid. And I hope all of this isn't something that's kind of forgotten when it maybe becomes inconvenient for the story or for a particular episode down the road, that a few episodes from now we don't see them using a bunch of explosives that they shouldn't have. However, when you consider the tagline of the show was basically something like how the Bad Batch now needs to make their own way in an ever-changing galaxy, something tells me this running out of supplies and needing credits thing is going to be a big part of the show going forward, and they're going to have to take a lot of odd jobs and probably a lot of mercenary style or delivery style jobs. In fact, I think that's basically what the rest of the first season here will be, them continuing to realize that if they're going to survive in the galaxy, they need to do something. They can't just lay low, they need to stay on the move and stay one step ahead of everyone that's after them, which right now seems to be Crosshair and the Empire, as well as Fennec Shand and whoever she's working for. Though I do think the easy and obvious answer there is she's been hired by the Kaminoans to bring back Omega. We saw at the end of last week's episode that Lama Su and Nala Se were discussing how Jango's DNA was degrading and that they were conducting an experiment to create a superior clone, but that they needed a direct source and that the clones required would not return willingly. But then Lama Su said that they only needed one, and I think the one they obviously need is Omega, who again Fennec Shand was hired to bring back. Though that said, I've also heard a lot of interesting and sort of big theories around all this, around what the Kaminoans are up to exactly, or what may happen, or what's going on. But I think this is all pretty simple and straightforward, and that the Bad Batch are obviously not quote-unquote defective clones. Instead, they're an intentional experiment to see if certain desirable traits of Jango could be enhanced, like strength, intelligence, and so on. And that the goal is to then put all these traits into one single clone and then mass produce that clone, which quite possibly is Omega. She could be the first clone they've instilled all or most of these traits into. They probably call her Omega, which basically means the end, because she is the end of the experiment, the last and best result they needed, and now they want her back to begin that mass production to ensure they will have a future of making soldiers for the Empire. And though yes, don't get me wrong, there could still be a twist to all of this. Perhaps Omega's DNA was blended with someone else's to get this optimal result. Perhaps midichlorians have been used, who knows. But I still wouldn't expect anything too huge or crazy out of all of this, which I have seen some predicting or theorizing. And so not to anger or disappoint anyone, but I'd temper your expectations a bit. Let's not turn this into another WandaVision for those who have seen it, where we really build up expectations for these major reveals that never actually come. Because I think the point of this story, or behind the character of Omega, is for her to just be Omega, to be something new and unique, though I do still think there could be a link between her and what we see going on in The Mandalorian, but only time will tell with that. And speaking of this sort of intrigue going on with the Kaminoans and their dealings with the Empire and what will become of the clones, which has all been very fascinating here in the early episodes, I do think that's kind of what this episode was missing. We didn't get anything from that side of things. We were with the Bad Batch the entire time, though we did see how the coming of the Empire was being celebrated on Pantora, which I thought was really cool and interesting, that there are of course those who welcome the change, who are welcoming the Empire, with those thunderous applause still. Along those same lines then, this did feel like another Hunter and Omega episode. We're still not getting too much out of the other members of the team. Not that we're not still very early and don't have plenty of time to get that. Like I was saying before, with 16 episodes, you do have a lot of time to slow down and take an entire episode to sort of go off the beaten path and focus on a different character perhaps. And I would be surprised if we, in the coming weeks, have an episode that focuses almost entirely on Wrecker or Tech or Echo or maybe all three, and maybe we see more interactions with them and Omega. Because I do think they'll really want to sell us on how the whole team is becoming attached to her before she's probably ultimately captured by Crosshair, and then we get this big season finale where they have to go after her, and they have to get her back, and they confront Crosshair, and they'll probably try to save him too. They'll probably know by then, or know more about their chips and know how to remove them, especially if they do run into Rex, who had his chip removed. And we did see in the trailer that they will run into him, so it is only a matter of time for that. Other than that, well, we see Wrecker hit his head yet again, even got knocked out this time, and I don't know if they're maybe subtly trying to set up something going wrong with this chip at some point, that it'll cause it to malfunction somehow, and they'll have to figure out how to take it out of his head, which maybe leads them to Rex, and then that later lets them know how to take it out of Crosshair's head to save him. Just a complete random guess here. More than likely this whole hitting the head thing will amount to pretty much nothing. Omega again in this episode is filled with wide-eyed wonder, and we also see that the Bad Batch didn't tell her one of the most important things all parents should tell their kids, which is don't talk to strangers. But anyway, I do enjoy her sense of awe and wonder at everything. As I've mentioned before, I do like the different approach they're taking with her as compared to, say, Ahsoka and Ezra in previous shows, with them being far more confident and a bit cocky. However, if I'm right about Omega, if she is this perfected clone, it's probably only a matter of time before that starts manifesting more, before she's doing more and more stuff. And I only hope that doesn't somehow ruin the character, that people don't start turning on her and calling her the next Rey or something like that. It was also just cool to see Fennec Shand in here, and that she was voiced by Ming-Na Wen, who plays her in The Mandalorian. And they are certainly setting up that she's been a rather ruthless character all along, because at one point when she carjacked, or maybe I should say speederjacked some guy, she just tossed him right out and no doubt to his death, and then she had no problem shooting at and killing the Pantorian police who were after her. So in closing here, it was a good episode, nothing special perhaps, but that is to be expected from a season that is going to run 16 episodes. We also have more than just the Empire after them now, and I think it's clear that the Kaminoans want Omega back, that she is the key to the next generation of the clone army, and they hired Fennec Shand to do just that, to get her back. I just can't see it being anyone else after her. I can't see them sort of adding a third faction to the mix, but who knows, I guess. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this latest episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think it was maybe filler? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.